What would you do if your boss fired you for being too old after you built their entire company? What if I told you there was a way to make them pay triple rent without them ever knowing who their new landlord was? Hi, my name is Nolan Burke, I'm 54 years old and this is exactly what happened to me. The revenge I got was sweeter than anything I could have imagined. Now let's begin. It was a Friday morning when everything changed. I walked into what they called a culture realignment meeting, thinking it was just another corporate buzzword session. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The HR director smiled, that fake smile they teach in training seminars. "Nolan, we want to thank you for your legacy contributions to Anwell and Brightwell," she said, sliding a folder across the conference table. Legacy contributions. I knew right then what was coming. Julian Knox, our 32-year-old CEO, leaned back in his chair with that smug look I'd grown to hate. "We're rebranding younger, Nolan. Fresh energy, new perspectives. You understand." I forced a smile even though my hands were trembling. 23 years I'd given this company. I'd hired half these people. Built the systems they were using to fire me. "Don't take it personally," Julian added, not even looking up from his phone. "You're just past your prime." The cardboard box sat waiting on the table like a coffin for my career. The walk to my office felt like a death march. Junior employees I'd trained avoided eye contact. The hallways I'd walked thousands of times suddenly felt foreign. Everything I'd built was being treated like clutter. Photos of company wins, client appreciation letters, my industry awards, all of it stuffed into that humiliating brown box. The worst part wasn't the firing. It was the disrespect. Like I was some broken piece of furniture they were finally throwing out. I passed the conference room where I'd closed our biggest deals. The break room where I'd celebrated promotions with people who wouldn't even wave goodbye. At the front door, I stopped. The glass windows reflected my face, tired, defeated. But then I looked up at the building itself. The brick facade, the modern additions, the sign that still bore traces of the original design I'd helped choose. "I built this," I whispered to myself. Those 3 words would change everything. At home, I sat across from my wife Diane at our kitchen table. The box sat between us like evidence of a crime. "They said I was past my prime," I told her, still processing the shock. Diane reached across and squeezed my hand. "Their loss, honey. Any company would be lucky to have you." But I wasn't so sure. 54 years old in a world obsessed with digital natives and disruptive innovation. My resume was impressive, but would anyone even read it? For the next week, I applied everywhere. Sent emails. Made calls. The silence was deafening. Then I saw it. Julian's LinkedIn post with a photo of the new, young, dynamic team. The caption read, "Excited to announce our Fresh Talent Initiative. Sometimes you need to replace outdated systems with cutting-edge solutions. #innovation #fresh start, outdated systems." He was talking about me. That's when the anger finally hit. Real, burning anger that would fuel what came next. 2 weeks after my firing, I met my old friend Carl at our usual coffee shop downtown. Carl had retired from commercial real estate the year before, but he still kept his ear to the ground. "Heard about Anwell," he said, stirring his coffee. "Rough break, Nolan." I shrugged. "Their choice. I'm moving on." Carl nodded, then mentioned something that made me nearly choke on my latte. "Funny thing though. That building they're in. It's up for sale." My heart stopped. "What?" "Yeah, the owner wants out. Looking for a quiet buyer, someone who won't scare the existing tenants. Cash deal, quick close." I tried to keep my voice steady. "How much?" Carl named a figure. It was steep, but not impossible. Especially with the severance package and my savings. "Why do you ask?" Carl studied my face. I took a long sip of coffee, mind racing. Just curious. But I wasn't just curious. I was calculating. That night, I couldn't sleep. I drove around the block 3 times, staring up at the building where I'd spent 23 years of my life. It wasn't revenge I was thinking about. Not yet. It was opportunity. The building was solid. Good location. Reliable tenants. It would be a smart investment even without the personal connection. But the personal connection made it irresistible. At 2 a.m., I called Carl. Remember what you said about that building? What if I were interested? Off the record? There was a pause. Off the record how? I don't want them to know it's me. Not yet. Carl chuckled. Nolan Burke, what are you planning? Nothing illegal. Just, strategic. With the right partner, we could make that happen. I know someone who specializes in discreet purchases. My smile was the first genuine one I'd had in weeks. Carl introduced me to Sabrina Klein the next morning. She was a sharp property investor who understood the value of staying invisible. You want to buy your former employer's building without them knowing? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I want to make a smart real estate investment, I corrected. The personal aspect is just coincidence. Sabrina smiled. I like your style. Here's how we do it. We formed an LLC under her name. Burke Holdings stayed hidden in the paperwork. Sabrina would handle all tenant communication and legal matters. I would handle the research and strategy. Within hours, we had our offer ready. 10% over asking price. No contingencies. Cash close in 30 days. You sure about this? Sabrina asked as we prepared to submit. I thought about Julian's smug face. His, past your prime, comment. Absolutely sure. The waiting game was torture. While our offer sat on the seller's desk, I had to act normal. I drove by the building often, but carefully. Just another car in traffic. Julian's company kept posting updates online. Team retreats to expensive resorts. New ping pong tables and craft beer taps. A rooftop yoga deck. All funded by the revenue I'd helped generate over 2 decades. Living our best life with our amazing young team, one post read. The comments were full of fire emojis and goals responses. I screenshot every single post. Then Carl called with the news that would change everything. Offer accepted. Congratulations, Nolan. You're now 51% owner of the building that houses Anwell and Brightwell. I sat in my car outside a grocery store and laughed until I cried. The hunter had become the landlord. Getting access to the tenant files was like reading my own future. I studied every page of Anwell and Brightwell's lease agreement with the focus of a detective. 5 years remaining on the current lease. No renewal guarantee. No ownership rights or purchase options. A beautiful, airtight trap that Julian had walked into blindly. The rent was below market value, a sweetheart deal the previous owner had offered when Anwell was struggling. I'd been there for those negotiations, actually helped Julian secure the terms. How ironic. But the most interesting part was buried in Section 12, a clause allowing for market rate adjustments upon renewal. The previous owner had never exercised it. I would. As I read through the lease, an email notification popped up on my phone. It was from Julian's assistant, sent to Sabrina's business address. Hi Ms. Klein, we'd like to discuss expanding our office space. Can we schedule a meeting? I smiled and started typing Sabrina's response, we'll review your request and get back to you. The game was just beginning. Keeping my identity secret was easier than I'd expected. Sabrina was a natural at corporate communication. Every email was professional, legally sound, and completely impersonal. When Julian requested lease modifications for expansion, we declined. Current agreement terms must be maintained, Sabrina wrote. When they asked about renovating the break room, we required extensive permits and insurance documentation that would take months to process. When they wanted to sublease unused space to a startup, we cited lease restrictions that prohibited it. Julian was getting frustrated. I could tell from the increasingly aggressive tone of his emails. Are you doing this to get even? Sabrina asked during one of our coffee meetings. I considered the question carefully. No. I'm doing this right. By the book. Legally. Professionally. And if it happens to drive them crazy in the process? That's just a bonus. By month 3 of my ownership, cracks were showing at Anwell and Brightwell. The Fresh Talent initiative was backfiring spectacularly. Young hires kept quitting after a few weeks. They were overworked, underqualified, and underpaid. The company was burning through staff like paper. Meanwhile, clients were complaining about missed deadlines and poor service. I heard this through my network, former colleagues who'd landed at competing firms. The irony was delicious. In trying to replace experience with youth, Julian had gutted his company's actual capability. Then came the email that made me laugh out loud. A recruiting firm reached out to me directly. Mr. Burke, we have a client interested in bringing you on as a senior consultant. The company prefers to remain anonymous, but they're willing to offer a significant compensation package. I knew exactly who that anonymous client was. Julian wanted me back. Julian's assistant called me directly this time, not knowing I was her new landlord. Mr. Burke, I hope you're doing well. Julian would really like to reconnect and discuss some consulting opportunities. He regrets how things ended. The desperation in her voice was music to my ears. I appreciate the outreach, I said politely, but I'm exploring other opportunities right now. He's willing to be very flexible on terms and compensation. I'm sure he is. Please give him my best. After hanging up, I forwarded a screenshot of the call log to Sabrina with a simple message: watch what they offer next. 3 days later, they submitted a formal request to lease the empty third floor. They needed space for rapid expansion to handle their explosive growth. Sabrina's response was swift and brutal: request denied per existing lease restrictions. Julian's public LinkedIn meltdown was immediate and beautiful. Julian's LinkedIn post was a masterpiece of corporate rage disguised as industry insight. Dealing with impossible landlords who don't understand modern business needs, he wrote. Some property owners are stuck in the past and refuse to adapt to the new economy. The post got dozens of comments. Half were supportive, half were people who'd clearly dealt with Julian's attitude before. I screenshot the entire thread and filed it carefully. But the best part was watching the internal chaos unfold. Employees were starting to whisper. I had sources, former colleagues who kept me informed about the growing panic inside Anwell and Brightwell. People are asking if we're being pushed out, one told me over lunch. Julian keeps denying it, but everyone can see he's stressed. If you're enjoying this wild ride of corporate revenge, smash that like button and drop a comment about the craziest workplace story you've ever heard. Trust me, this is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The company culture Julian had bragged about was crumbling. The young, dynamic team was gossiping instead of working. Productivity was down 30%. Meanwhile, I was just getting warmed up. Year 5 of their lease began with new restrictions. As the building owner, I had certain rights to implement safety and maintenance policies. No structural modifications without 6 months written notice. No subleasing under any circumstances. No storage of hazardous materials, including their fancy espresso machine that wasn't up to commercial code. Each new rule was perfectly legal and professionally communicated by Sabrina. Each one made Julian's life a little harder. But my masterpiece was still in development. Late at night, I sat at my home office crafting the document that would change everything. The new lease agreement for year 6. Triple the current rent. No cap on future increases. Strict compliance requirements. Everything was market rate and completely legal. Julian had been paying below market rent for years. Now he'd pay what the space was actually worth. I printed the final draft and smiled. 23 years of business knowledge had taught me exactly how to make this hurt. The leak came from an unexpected source. Julian's own assistant accidentally CC'd the wrong email address on a confidential memo about rent uncertainty and potential relocation. The message ended up in the inbox of a former colleague who forwarded it to me immediately. Emergency meeting tomorrow to discuss building situation, the memo read. Need contingency plans in case current lease becomes untenable. Within hours, the entire office was buzzing. Employees were updating their resumes. Clients were asking questions. Vendors were demanding immediate payment on outstanding invoices. Julian called an all-hands meeting to address the malicious rumors about the company's stability. We are not going anywhere, he declared, according to my source. Some people are trying to spread fear and chaos, but Anwell and Brightwell is stronger than ever. His face, I was told, said otherwise. The next day, I received an anonymous email. This is a current employee. I think our CEO is panicking. Thought you should know things are falling apart here. The dominoes were starting to fall. The new lease proposal arrived in Julian's inbox on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9 a.m. Sabrina had timed it perfectly, right when he'd be checking emails with his coffee. I imagined his reaction as he opened the PDF. The casual sip of coffee. The glance at the numbers. The double take. The spit take. Triple rent. Immediate effect upon lease renewal. 60 days to decide. His response came within an hour. This is ridiculous. Who owns this building? Sabrina's reply was ice-cold: professional, Burke Holdings LLC. All communication must go through designated representatives per confidentiality agreements. Burke Holdings. My little joke. He was smart enough to know Burke was my last name, but not smart enough to connect the dots. Not yet. 3 more emails followed in rapid succession, each more desperate than the last. Requests for negotiation. Demands for explanation. Threats of legal action. Sabrina responded to each with the same message: the terms are final. Please confirm acceptance or rejection by the deadline. Julian was trapped, and he was just starting to realize it. Julian demanded a face-to-face meeting with the property owner. After some back and forth, I agreed to meet him at an upscale steakhouse downtown. I arrived early and chose a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. When Julian walked in, scanning the room for his mysterious landlord, I raised my hand. He approached the table with confusion, not recognition. Time and stress had changed me. I'd grown a beard, lost weight, and wore glasses now. Mr. Julian extended his hand. Burke, I said, standing to shake his hand. Nolan Burke. The color drained from his face like water from a broken tank. For 10 seconds, neither of us spoke. Julian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You, he finally whispered. I gestured to the chair across from me. Please, sit. We have business to discuss. Julian collapsed into the chair, his corporate confidence evaporating. You bought the building. I lifted my wine glass in a mock toast. You fired me for being too old, remember? Turns out old dogs can learn new tricks. Julian's face went through every stage of grief in 30 seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, all playing out across his features like a silent movie. This is revenge, he stammered. This is business, I corrected. You taught me that. Personal feelings don't matter, right? It's all about results. Julian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Nolan, we can work something out. Come back to the company. I'll make you a partner. We'll figure out the lease. I took a slow sip of wine, savoring the moment. You wanted a modern culture, Julian. Young blood. Fresh energy. Now you can modernize your approach to commercial real estate. The rent is impossible. You know that. I know you paid yourself a $200,000 bonus last quarter while laying off the accounting department. His eyes widened. How did you? I have friends everywhere. 23 years builds a lot of relationships. I stood up and placed money on the table for my meal. Julian hadn't touched his food. The lease expires in 60 days. You can accept the new terms or find somewhere else. As I walked away, Julian called after me. Nolan, please. Can't we? I turned back one last time. You said I was past my prime. Maybe it's time to prove you wrong. Julian's public meltdown became office legend within hours. He returned from our meeting in a rage, slamming doors and shouting at anyone who made eye contact. Staff morale, already low, hit rock bottom. 3 more people quit that week. 2 major clients terminated their contracts. My inbox filled with messages from former colleagues who'd heard rumors about my involvement. Is it true you own their building now? One wrote. Because if so, you're my hero. Another, Julian's been walking around like a zombie for days. Whatever you did, thank you. The most satisfying message came from a junior developer I'd mentored years ago, heard through the grapevine that karma finally caught up with that arrogant prick. Hope it was everything you dreamed of. But the sweetest intelligence came from my source inside the company. Julian mortgaged his house to try to keep the company afloat. His wife is furious. They're talking about divorce. Destroying someone's career was one thing. Watching their entire life unravel because of their own arrogance. That was justice. The story broke on a local business blog 3 weeks before the lease deadline. The headline read, Fired executive secretly becomes landlord, dismantles former company from within. They didn't name me directly, but anyone with Google could connect the dots. The timeline matched perfectly. Former employee terminated, building sold to Mystery LLC, company struggling with impossible rent demands. The article went viral in our industry. LinkedIn was buzzing. Local news picked it up. Julian tried damage control with a Facebook post, dealing with a vindictive former employee who's using property ownership to settle personal scores. This is what happens when hurt feelings turn into harassment. The comments section was brutal. People who'd worked with Julian over the years shared their own stories of his arrogance and age discrimination. Karma's a bitch, wrote one. Maybe don't fire loyal employees and expect no consequences. Julian stormed into Sabrina's office the next day, demanding answers. She called me immediately. He's furious, she reported. Threatening all kinds of legal action. Let him threaten. Everything we've done is completely legal. He wants to sue for retaliatory rent increases. I laughed. Good luck proving that in court. Market rate is market rate. Julian's lawsuit threat turned into actual legal papers within a week. He was suing for retaliatory rent increases based on personal vendetta. Sabrina forwarded the filing to me with a note, "This should be fun." Our lawyer reviewed the case and delivered the verdict I expected, they have no grounds. Everything was done legally. Market rate adjustments are standard property management practice. The lawsuit was dismissed in preliminary hearings. The judge noted that property owners have the right to charge market rates regardless of personal relationships with tenants. Julian was now behind on his current rent while paying legal fees for a case he couldn't win. The eviction notice went up the following week. Red paper taped to the front door of the building I'd once called home. Notice to quit or pay rent, in bold letters. I drove by that evening and saw Julian standing on the sidewalk, staring up at the notice like it was written in a foreign language. 23 years of my life, and he'd reduced it to a cardboard box and a handshake. Now he knew how it felt to lose everything. The eviction process moved with bureaucratic efficiency. Notices were posted. Legal requirements were met. Deadlines came and went. Julian tried one last desperate spin on social media. Being forced out by predatory landlord practices. This is what's wrong with commercial real estate today. Nobody was buying it. The business community knew exactly what had happened and why. Equipment started disappearing from the office. Expensive computers, furniture, the ping-pong table Julian had bragged about on LinkedIn. Everything was being sold to cover debts. The staff, what was left of them, was relocated to a cramped co-working space across town. No more rooftop yoga. No more craft beer taps. Just folding tables and shared Wi-Fi. I bought their old leather couch from the liquidation sale. Had it delivered to my garage with a custom plaque, younger. Cheaper. Gone. Diane thought I was being petty. She was right. I didn't care. The final day of their tenancy, I watched from my car as the moving trucks left. 23 years of history being loaded into cardboard boxes and hauled away. Julian stood on the sidewalk one last time, looking up at the building. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered his smug face in that conference room. His "past your prime" comment. The way he'd smiled while destroying my career. The sympathy passed quickly. That evening, my phone rang. Julian's name on the caller ID. Nolan, please. I'm begging you. Give me another chance. His voice was broken. Desperate. Nothing like the confident CEO who'd fired me. I'll give you 10% of the company. We can start fresh. Partners. I listened to him grovel for 30 seconds before hanging up. Diane found me in the garage later, sitting on Julian's old couch. Was that closure? She asked. I smiled. No. That was the punchline. Within 6 months, I had new tenants. A veteran-run nonprofit that provided job training for people over 50. The irony was perfect. I offered them below-market rent, upgraded facilities, and mentorship programs. Everything Julian's company wasn't. We can't thank you enough, the director told me during the lease signing. This space is perfect for our mission. What's your mission? I asked, though I already knew. Helping older workers find new careers after age discrimination. Proving that experience has value. I smiled. I think that's a mission I can support. The building felt alive again. People who appreciated experience. Who understood that age brought wisdom, not obsolescence. Julian's company lasted another 8 months in their cramped co-working space before declaring bankruptcy. I read about it in the same business blog that had broken my story. Former rising star startup closes doors after real estate disaster, the headline read. I forwarded the article to Sabrina with one word, checkmate. A year later, I was standing on the roof of my building, watching the sunset paint the city gold. The nonprofit downstairs was thriving. Their clients were finding jobs, rebuilding careers, proving that experience mattered. Julian had moved to another state, according to LinkedIn. Divorced. Starting over at 34 with nothing but debt and a reputation for failure. I felt no guilt. He'd made his choices. Treated people like disposable assets. Believed that youth was the only currency that mattered. The market had corrected him. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane, dinner's ready. Come home. I took one last look at the city below. Somewhere out there, other experienced workers were being pushed aside by arrogant young bosses who thought age was a liability. Maybe my story would inspire them to fight back. To prove that being older meant being smarter, more patient, more strategic. Drop a comment below if you think Julian got what he deserved, and hit that subscribe button because I've got more stories that'll blow your mind. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even. 5 years have passed since that Friday morning meeting. The building is fully leased now. The nonprofit has expanded to 2 floors. A consulting firm run by Over the Hill executives occupies the 3rd floor. I still drive by sometimes, remembering the younger version of myself who built his career in those halls. Who believed loyalty mattered. Who thought experience was valued. Julian taught me that none of those things were true. But he also taught me something else. That patient, calculated revenge is more satisfying than any angry outburst. That knowledge and experience can be weapons if you know how to use them. They fired me for being too old. So I made sure they learned that age doesn't just bring wisdom. Age builds empires. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and smart enough, you can use those empires to teach the next generation a lesson they'll never forget. The young wolves think they own the world. But the old lions? We still know how to hunt.